China has new areas, Saudi Arabia has economic cities, UK has free ports. The idea is always the same. We have better rules than in the surrounding country, in the host country, and we reap the benefits. That's the biggest, catch-22 of free cities, that you're creating a refuge from the rules of a government, but ultimately you're at the whims of the same government that has made the situation so bad in the first place.
Yes, right. Let's start then. Well, we could do a continuation, but I don't think we need to, because you've got a lot of new things that we can talk about, and actually I've made a little list of them here. And you know what I want to start with, because this is something I knew nothing about, which I've discovered that you know quite a lot about, is Odessa. Mm-hmm. And I think us talking about Odessa is much more. It's quite on point, because we last spoke in Dubai, and Dubai and Odessa have kind of like quite a lot in common in a way. Is that right? Is that fair to me?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so
only that they are 2 centuries apart, but it even makes the point stronger, because it shows that in any era, if you create the right incentives, so whether you are a Greek merchant of the 19th century or a digital nomad of the 21st, if you see this economic freedom and opportunities, you probably will vote with your feet.
Okay, so Odessa, right. Now, from what I know of it, it was a kind of SEZ, and it was founded in about 1780 or 1782. Is that right?
Right.
You know what? But before we even start talking about this, do you know what the thing that struck me whenever I think about this, and the fact that Odessa was such a success story, is why? And I'm probably jumping the gun a bit here, but why don't people do more of these? Like, because they obviously work. There's lots of working examples of special places, like special economic zones that work. I don't understand why they're not done more often, or am I just missing it? I know there's 6,000 of them on the planet, but that's not that many when you think about it, is it?
Right.
So I'm wondering, why does this not happen more often? Like, why do we always find places that are stifling growth and stifling innovation and stifling all these things? Whereas when you look at these SEZs, you see this explosion of creation, of people wanting to be there, of people doing things, innovating. It doesn't seem like rocket science to me.
True.
I know I'm an outsider looking in. You're probably an insider looking out. So tell me what you think.
Well, there are multiple reasons why we don't see them as much as we would expect to or want to. So one, maybe we should start from the fact that, they're competing with each other. So to outcompete those that are already existing and well-known, like Dubai International Financial District, or like city-states like Singapore and Hong Kong, all the special jurisdictions that we are all aware of, you need to introduce something extra, something on top of that. So not just relaxed banking rules or the common law that common law jurisdiction that you can use for all your business activity, not just lower taxes, not just lower custom tax. You have to go an extra mile. And I think that Free Cities is kind of how we are trying to go an extra mile. So it's not just to create not just hubs for economic activity, but also lifestyle special zones that would combine economic incentives with lifestyle incentives, all the things from good, well-planned architecture to maybe personal freedoms and political freedoms. So Odessa was like that. I don't know, maybe we should start from discussing where is the city, what we're talking about.
I think so. I think I did. I was jumping ahead a bit, but I couldn't help myself because I keep thinking every time I hear another story of the success of something like a special economic zone, I always think now, why isn't this what people do? Why don't people do this? And the ultimate thought when you follow that forward is, well, why don't you just create free places that don't stifle innovation, have small regulators and not large, huge regulators? And, that then becomes, that's probably the truth.
Well, I can tell you. So again, what makes Odessa and Dubai a bit similar is that, speaking of Dubai, there is a famous saying that's attributed to the late Sheikh Rashid: "What is good for the merchants is good for Dubai." The same was true in Odessa. It was aimed at attracting merchants, and then all these people who made fortunes in the city thanks to its favorable rules, including like runaway serfs, for example. It was a refuge. It was like the Wild West of the Russian Empire, where they were accepting runaways because the Russian Empire had serfdom back then, or still in the 19th century, and the local rulers were like, okay, we don't care what they think in St. Petersburg. We need a lot of hardworking people to build a new city, so we won't ask them. Don't ask, don't tell. And then all these people who made fortunes, they reinvested it back into the city development by paving streets, building hospitals and schools, helping the poor. So my point is that you have to make, the government has to, in a way, think like a merchant, think like a business person, think like, and we don't have that many governments thinking like that because they don't have incentives to do that, because they will get your tax, they will get money no matter what. So you have to have a sort of an exceptional case, maybe a far-sighted ruler, maybe you have to have, or maybe you have to be desperate. Like, for example, there is a lot of these cities with a special economic zone status that are now mushrooming all over Africa. Well, I know that we will have a few people at the conference speaking about that from their first-hand experience. And why Africa? Because some governments, they are so poor, they just can't provide enough infrastructure for this rapid growth of rapid urbanization, which is unmatched anything we see in other parts of the world. So they don't have other options other than to outsource it to the private businesses, and to attract private businesses, you have to do something. So that's that's probably actually that's the number one explanation why we don't have that many, because you need a government permission, you need a green light to create something like that, and governments are not incentivized to do that.
Okay, so let's talk about what I originally said then, before I sort of took you off on a tangent there, which is Odessa. And maybe you should give us a little bit about the history of Odessa first, like the geography as well.
Yeah, this is a interesting one, because if you look at the pictures, if you look at the Baroque architecture, like the opera, the mansions, you might think that, oh, maybe this is somewhere in France, maybe that's French Riviera, maybe that's Italy. And if you listen to the street names, you will think the same. Like there are the central streets are called Langeron Beach, Devolon Descent, Deribas Street, the French Boulevard. But actually then you find out that this is the Black Sea. This is the territory of modern Ukraine. It's the biggest seaport in Ukraine today. And you're asking yourself, how come such a European city appeared here? And you look back at its history and you realize that everything about Odessa was special. So it grew rapidly. In the late 18th century, it was a small, dusty village where you could barely get fresh water, drinking water. And 2 decades later, it is the most rapidly growing European port. It is a resort where people come not just from the nearby countries, but all the way from France and Italy, saying, because I've studied a lot of this notes, like travel journals of people coming there, because I think that's the most fascinating source of information about that, because you hear firsthand stories of just regular people, and people coming from France were saying, we feel like home here. Mark Twain was there, the American writer, and he was impressed. He said that this is city has a business look. Some visitors would compare it to France, some would compare it to Paris. You could hear 20 languages on a single day on the streets. So it was the most multicultural, cosmopolitan city for many miles. It had a very vibrant literature life. It had a very vibrant musical life. And again, some witnesses were writing in their journals that common people were singing opera arias in the street. So the atmosphere was like nothing else you could, and that was in the Russian Empire. It was one of the most repressive regimes of its time. And it still had serfdom, it had censorship. And the funny thing is that the Russian Emperor Nicholas I was calling it a nest of conspirators. But St. Petersburg was far away. So eventually they didn't do anything about that. So it was both an economic hub, and it was also a political refuge for everyone who felt uneasy under the Russian Empire, from Jewish merchants to creative people of all kinds.
You made me think of a question there. We'll probably end up on a different tangent here as well, which may not be a good idea. But you're kind of alluding to the fact that back then, creating an SEZ, we can call it an SEZ, right?
Yes.
Yeah, creating an SEZ in Odessa actually led to it being quite a cultural hub.
True.
And a trendy place to go and visit, probably a bit like, tourists would go there and hang, and artists would hang. Is that right?
Yes.
Right, okay. Now, I thought then of Dubai, right, in the modern context. I don't necessarily think of Dubai as a cultural hub. So what's the difference? Why did 200 or whatever years ago the SEZ create the trendy people, the counterculture almost, and now Dubai isn't necessarily, maybe it's coming, I don't know, but I don't think of Dubai as being a place that's innovative in a creative way. Maybe it is, maybe I'm missing something.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. Well, Odessa had also this exceptional political freedom. Dubai, again, compared to what? Compared to places where a lot of people come to Dubai from, it is a very politically unfree place. Compared to the region, to the Middle East, it is quite a progressive one. And it's the cultural life. Yeah, I've moved there from London, so you can't compare them. And I'm missing all the London Museum and exhibitions and concerts, but it's coming. So, and I hear from many people that they expected much less of Dubai before coming there. So it now has some cultural centers of activities like the Al Surkal Avenue. But yeah, that's the problem. If you ask anyone in Dubai, where do you go? What's the cultural place? They all name this one thing. So, but that's the beginning. I hope so. And there is such thing that I read in a book that's called New Arab Urban. It's about new cities in the Gulf. And the authors use this term morality zoning. So it's not just special economic zones, it's sort of a special morality zone where, for example, different rules apply to expats and to the locals. So this is something that you find a lot in the Emirates. Like you can go, that for the locals, the rules are very conservative. They can't buy alcohol, for example. So if you if you're an expat, you get a license. You literally get it in 5 minutes by applying online, but still. And there is Abu Dhabi has a branch of Louvre, and it's an amazing place. It's the real Louvre with world-class art, and you can go there and you can see, for example, nudity in picture on paintings like in any art gallery. And this is something that, on the other hand, you kind of not expect. This is something that's not permitted outside. So, but Louvre is the special morality zone, or the university campuses can also be the special morality zones, the hotels, some resorts. So it's a bit of a weird one, but yeah, that's how it works.
And you think it'll progress?
I hope so.
And how about, obviously I'm looking at this through the eyes of a former Londoner like you. So I'm probably missing the fact that Dubai is a hub for Middle Eastern culture. And is that evolving as far as you can see? Is it, the version of it I get is the occasional fashion show that you see, showcasing Middle Eastern clothes that are quite trendy. But it's obviously more than that. There's obviously famous Middle Eastern artists, contemporary artists and architects and all this kind of stuff. Is that true? Because I know, sorry to butt in, but in Dubai, they're quite famous for bringing outsiders in to design things for them, aren't they?
Yes, I can tell you definitely, because I've been working for Zaha Hadid Architects for 7 years, and we have opened a few buildings there, and it's pleasant when in Dubai, literally everyone in the street knows who Zaha Hadid is, because they made such a big fuss of, telling everyone, we got a Zaha Hadid building. And if you tell, have you seen the Opus Tower? Yeah, of course, we've seen the Opus Tower. That's your company. Wow.
But what about the local culture then? Is that progressing? Is there a cutting edge of Emirati culture, or is it not something they're not as concerned about?
Well, they're supporting it, and probably, yes. There is also, apart from the Al Surkal Avenue that I mentioned, which is like a hipster hub of Dubai, there is the Jamil Art Center, where they exhibit local artists, and I was quite impressed when I went there. There is an art foundation in Sharjah, the nearby Emirates, which is also considered like a hub. So, yes, I think it's slowly being developed. Obviously, this is very heavily supported by the government, but yeah, that's how it is. And for a hub for the Middle East, this is also an interesting one, because there is this. If you ask people in the other Gulf countries like Qatar, Kuwait, they have this love-hate relationship with Dubai, because they want to be like Dubai, but also they don't want to admit it, that they all look up to Dubai. And for example, I have a friend from Saudi Arabia, and she was telling me proudly that we don't go to Dubai to party anymore. We have enough of the nightlife in Riyadh. So that means that they used to go to Dubai to have this breath of fresh air. So again, I think that this is one of the actually things that we take for granted, that my point is that you have to take things into comparison. So that applies to economic freedom, that applies to personal freedoms, that also applies to urban planning, for example. When people say that, these new cities, they lack beauty, they lack walkability. This is true, but compared to what? Compared to Amsterdam or Barcelona or Prague, which is, in my view, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, or compared to the villages where these people used to live in huts, and now they had a chance to, leapfrog into the 21st century. So that is one thing that you hear a lot, not just addressed to Dubai, but addressed to many of these startup cities and free cities too. That, oh, this is boring. This is artificial. And I think artificial is all this Chinese ghost towns are artificial. The Soviet, a lot of the Soviet company towns, monotowns as they were called, were artificial. Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, is artificial because nobody asked for it, because it was just created by decree, because it was part of some big vision. Places places that naturally attract businesses and people are not artificial by definition. There is a demand for that. I would draw this distinction, like artificial city is the one that nobody asked for and asked to be built. Living city is the city that a lot of people want to move to, and architecture design is, well, in my view, a very important aspect, but it's just, from a different, it's not the thing you judge a city, whether it's artificial or genuine.
I think I have a slightly different categorization of artificial, because I come across this a lot in speaking to people about free cities as well. Artificial for me is somewhere that's been built all in one go. So it's been conceived of and built in one go. And natural is something that grew naturally around a resource or an idea or something like that. Because someone pointed that out to me about Próspera the other day. I was speaking to someone about Próspera, who was someone who I would have thought wouldn't have liked Próspera, and went there. He was on the podcast last week. And surprisingly, he said he was really impressed by Próspera. And I said, come on, mate, there must have been something you didn't like about it. And his only answer that he could find was, well, it was a bit like fake looking, because, and I agree. I agree with things like that. You see it in houses as well. When an interior designer comes into a house and interior designs the whole house, it's completely different from a house that somebody moved into and over a period of 10 years did up each room slowly, and all these, and one of them has soul and one of them doesn't. And that's not to say that Próspera won't end up feeling like a non-artificial place, but I think it is one of the traps of designing anything from scratch, is it has this kind of sameness to it. And even when you try and, make it look like there's a diversity of thought there, people can see through it. And I mean, you're an architect, so...
I'm not an architect.
Well, sorry,
I'm an urbanist, but I'm working closely with architects as a team. So, no, I agree with you. I'm a big fan of Jane Jacobs, the mother of urbanism, as she's often referred to. You know who Jane Jacobs is? She wrote a book in 1961 called The Death and Life of Great American Cities, and it made a splash, and it keeps, creating debates until today. So basically, she wasn't an architect; she was a journalist. Her husband was an architect, so she's been exposed to the architectural ideas, and she's been writing about it. And she started, it was in the mid-20th century, traveling across America and seeing how the lively, living, breathing cities were gradually becoming monotonous and one like another. And she started asking herself, why is it so? And she came to the conclusion that city is not a work of art. City cannot be a brainchild of some specific, however bright, architecture planner or governor. City have to be... So basically, she was like applying the idea of spontaneous order, the Hayek's and the Austrian economics, to urban planning. She didn't refer to them directly, but it was very similar ideas that cities are the creations of spontaneous order, of multiple actions of multiple people, and only then they can be lively. And so she was talking a lot about what she called the generators of diversity, things that create vibrant street life, eyes on the street, as she was calling it, sidewalk ballet. One of her main ideas was that you need to have buildings of different eras in a city, so it's properly living. But a funny thing is that she became very like a number one urbanist, and everyone was looking up to her, and she was getting letters from mayors and urban planners from all over America. And multiple times she used a corner grocery store as an example of something that generates that street life. Like you have this, shop with organic food, organic farmers' vegetables, and everyone come by and know each other, and you say hi to the owner, and people chat. And she got a letter from some mayor saying, I read your book. Now we have drawn a new master plan, and every corner must have a grocery store. So that was the way, and that's still the way everyone, all these new urbanists and smart cities folks, they refer to Jane Jacobs, but they talk about the superficial things, not the substance. They don't get the idea of spontaneous order. They just think you can create it by copy-paste. And all of this was to say that, of course, like an ideal living city like Prague has to have history, but we cannot create we need a lot of, in any case. So yeah, if Dubai had history, if Próspera had historical buildings, that would be, of course, amazing. But we will need a lot of new cities one way or another. We have very, very unprecedented urbanization in many countries, in India, in Nigeria, in some Latin American countries, and we will need new cities one way or another. And if you create a new city, it wouldn't have history. And yeah, that's a drawback, but this is something you have to cope with, because again, we look from a very privileged perspective. We have seen all these glorious European cities with centuries, maybe thousands year old history, with the remains of the Roman forts and medieval churches and cobbled streets and all these things that we admire. But and then we look down on new built places, saying, "Oh, it doesn't have a soul." Well, not everyone can live in Prague. Not everyone can live in Barcelona. Not everyone can live in London. We want to raise a lot of people out of poverty, and we can't create ideal. We can't bring them all to these existing cities. We will have to support creation of new ones. They won't be ideal, but they will be much better. They will be a huge upgrade from the current conditions of living that they have.
I think the other problem with modern new build cities, or not necessarily cities, but places, is they often use what I would call substandard building materials as well, compared to the times of past, where stone was milled, large blocks of stone were used to create houses, which really doesn't occur anymore. And in fact, I think we're going through a bit of a phase at the moment, but houses that I'm seeing going up around where I live are being built terribly. They're literally metal and wood frames and not much else. Great and all high tech, very eco-friendly, but almost look like they're designed to be replaced in not that many years, compared to all the other houses in existence, which are up to, my house is 400, originally 400 years old, and it's no different from when we started. Literally, the beams are the same, the walls are a meter thick and made of stone, And that is one of the things that does bug me a little bit about when I see new buildings being made. There's a lot of concrete involved, and I don't know. I think I know why, because it's too expensive to build a house with stone or to build a large building, but maybe that will even change. Maybe the time preference idea will change. In your work, is it common to think of the life cycle of a building as being quite short, or do you design for longevity?
No, these days it is the prime demand that the build for all this, because of all the sustainability agenda. All the architects are expected to count the life cycle impact. So basically, to design something that will stand for many years, and when it's outdated, when it's no longer relevant, can be converted or at worst disassembled and reused. And the interesting thing is that in Europe, for example, well, it's a bit of a side story, but the European Union is making all these ridiculously detailed regulations on sustainability in construction. But if you look at the new buildings, and if you look at the world-class architects, and if you look at, so when people have money, when they can hire a world-class architect, they don't need regulation, they want it, because there is a market demand for sustainability, for integrating green walls into your buildings. But again, you have to reach a certain level of wealth to be able to afford it. I think you answered your own question, that many people, you have both. Yeah, in Dubai, a lot of buildings. It's funny, when we were flat hunting, and in London, then they tell you, oh, you're lucky, this is late Victorian, this is quite a new building. And in Dubai, the real estate agent tells you, guys, we have to warn you, this building is old, it's 15 years old. So that proves your point. But obviously there are buildings that are built up to a very high standard. It's just that not everyone can afford it. So, and also when you build a city from scratch, it probably has to be, not has to, but it's expected to be rebuilt, rearranged as the population grows, as the people's desires and preferences change. For example, our neighborhood in Dubai is called the Greens because it is green, but there's not many areas like that in Dubai which are walkable, where you can, take a stroll with a dog, with a pram, go for jogging. But it's coming. It's just that, some of the new areas, like the Blue Waters, for example, near Marina, they're affluent because not everyone can afford living there. But you can see where it's going, because when people have money, they pay for good architecture, they pay for sustainable approach, they pay for walkability and green areas. So the question is not how to provide this to everyone, by decree. The question is, how do we raise a lot of people's, how do we raise the living standards? How do we make people grow richer so that eventually everyone gets access to all these nice things that we think make cities awesome?
I suppose it's what you're saying is that there'll always be a market for cheaply made buildings that are to be replaced. And I'm thinking of London now. In the olden days, East London was probably wooden shacks mainly, and they were all knocked down and replaced by stone buildings at some point as the sort of general wealth of the city rose.
Yeah, you need this. You need the property ladder. You need people to have at least some decent living, decent place to live before they can. So yeah, London is a very, very good or very bad, depending on how you look at it, example, because it has very strict, for example, regulations on the minimal size of a flat you can have. And the government justifying it by, all these talks about dignity, like it's indignifying to live in a small place. Okay, so it's dignifying to spend your life commuting or flat share when you're 40 something with strangers. So this is much better. So they think that if you ban flats that are smaller than 39 square meters, then magically everyone will get a flat that's 60 square meters. No, it's not working like that. You need, if you want people to get richer, they first need to find a place next to the job that they want, and so they can start living in a small place. They earn money. They get a bigger place. Somebody who had just graduated moves into a small place. You need a ladder, and if you artificially destroy the lower steps of the ladder, and then you say, "Oh, we have a housing crisis." Yeah, you will always have with this approach.
I think also one of the big problems that causes housing issues like that is people investing in houses and just letting them sit there, which is very common these days for people to store their wealth in houses rather than actually live in houses, because it just makes a lot of houses unavailable. It also pushes the price of all houses up. When you have people with extra wealth who are choosing to invest in houses rather than to live in them, I think that's something I've noticed, because people are basically, for want of a better expression, using houses as money.
Yeah, that's a sign of a bigger problem, that people don't trust financial institutions. If there will be another financial crunch, then the house is the only way to save your money. So that's a question of how we fix the financial system, which is an entirely different conversation.
I know, one of my favorites, but we won't be having it here, I promise. Look, let's go back to Odessa, what we were supposed to be talking about. So what I was going to say about Odessa was you gave me the impression from reading all these travel logs from, merchants of old or whoever, that it was a pretty free place, as well as it being an SEZ. So it had a lot of cultural freedom, a lot of, so tell me a little bit more, because that sounds very interesting. I hope you're not sugarcoating it. No. Okay, well let's hear about it then. What's the history of the place, and how did it start, and why did it start? I mean, that's obviously one of the main reasons. Why did Odessa appear there?
Because there was a need for a new port, and there were several candidates, and eventually this place was chosen. There was the place that, there was a village called Hacı Bey, which is a Turkic name, there on that spot. So it wasn't an entirely unpopulated. But yeah, it had a strategic location on the Black Sea. So there were merchants circulating between Greek ports, Turkic ports. So it was a strategic choice for maritime trade.
And was there a particularly progressive leader in that part of the world at the time? Like, how did it become such an innovative place?
There was a range of leaders. So it was started by the Russian empress, but then the real reason is that they just let it exist and develop and on its own. But the range of progressive leaders, most of the early leaders were what we would call today foreign technocrats. So there was Duc de Richelieu, who was one of the first mayors. There was Frans de Volan from the Netherlands, who was the chief architect. So a lot of early rulers, they were people who brought their expertise from all over Europe, and there was Count Langeron, José de Ribas from Spain, and all the main streets today, they bear their names. And I have a personal connection to Odessa. My husband is a descendant of one of the early Odessa rulers with the same last name, Alexander Kaznachev. He was the one who introduce Porto Franco regime. And we were in Odessa together. We went to a local museum, and there was a portrait, and the museum worker said, "Oh, you look so much like him." Yeah. So yeah, there was a whole range of this Many of them were members of the Masonic Lodge, which at that time was, like attracting all the free thinkers.
Just one of those societies that seem to attract people with that kind of a idea, mindset. You mentioned something there that I think needs clarifying. Porto Franco regime. Yes. What's that?
So Porto Franco means free port. This is the definition is that it's a port where you can import and export goods and store goods without custom duties. And this concept has become very popular during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, specifically in the Mediterranean. So a lot of Italian ports like Venice, Genoa, they were Porto Franco. They had Porto Franco regime, and they were, like Odessa, they were not just hubs for trade, but they were places that inspired the circulation of ideas, art. So wealth generated through these ports. It was funding projects of iconic Renaissance artists like Michelangelo and Da Vinci. Then it was not just Italy. So Hamburg was a free port. It was actually one of the oldest continuously running Porto Franco in history. It dates back to the 12th century, and it was one of the wealthiest ports in Europe ever. Places like Trieste, Livorno, they also grew as Porto Francos. So Odessa, when it was already a booming hub, then they decided that, okay, we want an even better regime, and they introduced this Porto Franco. Custom duties were cut 10 times. And
hold on a sec. What was the initial? You said that Odessa was already a vibrant place. What was it in the first instance that made Odessa so vibrant? What were the kind of benefits? What was the attraction to people to come there?
So the attraction was that there was already very low custom taxes. And also, I think that a lot of people were attracted by the fact that it was sort of a blank slate. It was built from scratch, so they already could use all the know-hows and all the best architectural practices. And they invited a lot of Italian architects. So if you look at the Odessa Opera, it looks very much like it could be found, in Milan, maybe, and even. So, and this political freedom too. So in the early 19th century, more than a third of Odessa population didn't have passports, which means that they were either foreigners or they were runaway serfs. So,
wow. The other thing that I wanted to say was when you were talking about Porto Francos, what's like when I've been speaking a bit recently about the Thames Estuary project in London? Is that a Porto Franco? Or is there any resemblance between what they're doing there and a Porto Franco regimes?
There is. I think that the special economic zone is like an umbrella term. This has existed for centuries. This idea, we just use different terms apply to different countries. Like China has new areas, Saudi Arabia has economic cities, UK has free ports, Nigeria has free zones, and so on. Honduras has ZS. But the idea is always the same. We have better rules than in the surrounding country, in the host country, and we reap the benefits.
Okay, so now Odessa sounds amazing, but maybe it didn't. Did it decline in the end? And if so, why?
No, it didn't decline. It's just that the communists came.
Right. Once again, I'm asking that question. Why doesn't this happen more often? Not communists coming, obviously, but
Thank God.
I'm yet to discover downside to creating these kind of places? Like what's the downside?
I can tell you
what's the downside to like giving people freedom to innovate?
I can tell you that what's not the real downside, but the perceived downside. Every time you talk about these stories, not among the free cities enthusiasts, but in front of some, just general crowd, the first or second comment would be, "Oh, you're creating the tax haven for the wealthy, for the people who want to, fence themselves from the world's problems and."
Well, come on, let's talk about that.
No, let the world burn, and they would live a luxury life. And the thing is, these people already have plenty of places in the world to do so. And you have talked to a lot of people building free cities, and I'm sure none of them told you, "Oh, I want to create a place where, the filthy rich will be enjoying their lives." You have a lot of gated communities all over the world. They want to create something opposite. They want for just common people to have similar opportunities.
But I mean, there is no doubt that a lot of free city projects are hoping to or are offering a low tax rate comparative to the host nation. So that's true. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a bunch of billionaires suddenly move there and smoke their cigars and go ha ha ha, because also that would be a really boring place. We know that from history. I've been to places, tax havens before, and they're not exactly places I really personally. I don't want to hang out there anyway. They're rather uninspiring places. So you're saying Odessa was just would still be what it is today, would still be the same today, were it not for communism and obviously now a war, presumably. I mean, what's the current state of it, literally?
Well, the current state is, it's tragic. It was hit multiple times by the Russian missiles. So the cathedral church was hurt badly, a number of 19th century mansions, the museums, including my favorite literature museum. So it's living, but it regularly gets hit by drones and missiles. But what I admire about Odessa, and always admired, I've worked there quite a lot. When I lived in Ukraine, I worked with Atlas Network, a libertarian think tank, and we were holding events in Odessa. Back then, it was also, even back then, it was 2015, 2016, it was seen as a beacon of economic freedom for the rest of Ukraine, which was going through reforms after the revolution. And so you probably, that's a whole another story, but back in mid-2000s, Georgia, another country in the Caucasus, had gone through the most radical market reforms that the post-Soviet world has seen. But then, unfortunately, the new government came, which was supported by Russia, and most of this reformers team, they had to leave the country. And at some point, they all ended up not just in Ukraine, but in Odessa. And the former Georgian president, Mikhail Saakashvili, who's now in prison in Georgia, but he was a governor of Odessa, and they were organizing all these forums and events. There was even a thing called Odessa Reform Package. It was like an economic freedom manifesto that they wanted to start these reforms from Odessa and then kind of set example for the rest of Ukraine. Didn't go forward for multiple reasons, but it tells you that Odessa still remained this, it had this image of a place that had a little bit of freedom than everyone else. And I was organizing events there called Odessa Game Changers. It was a gathering of social entrepreneurs from all over Ukraine, people who were transforming their respective cities without any government aid, creating this social entrepreneurship projects, basically it was all in the spirit of this Odessa 19th century, where people making money reinvest this money back into making cities a better place. And what was I going to say about Odessa? So yeah, what I always admired is this optimism. So even when the war was full-scale war was already raging, they applied for they made a bid to host the World Expo, obviously, when the war's over, and we at Zaha Hadid developed a master plan pro bono for them, which was, incorporating all these things we discussed earlier, the reusability of architecture, like how can we assemble these pavilions that would be temporary and then disassemble them and transport all over Ukraine to create schools and social hubs. So it remained, even during the war, it remains this place where creativity flourishes.
That's interesting. You were designing buildings that could be taken down, moved, and used as something else. Yes. Similar thing you designed for Próspera as well.
Yes, yes.
Same, not the same exact same thing, but the same idea.
Yes.
Yeah. Did I was just thinking about what you were saying. Did when communism fell in that region, did Odessa retain any of its original kind of characteristics like free port status and stuff like that, or did it just get sort of incorporated into everything else, and it was no longer a special zone?
Well, it was not a special zone economically, but culturally, it always had that spirit of. A place that's slightly different, that place that's slightly more quirky, more. They had this, there is a thing called Odessa humor. So this is a very specific strain of humor jokes that.
Tell me one. What's an Odessa joke?
I don't think.
I wouldn't get it.
This is no. I don't think it's translatable, and unfortunately, nothing comes from the top of my head.
Oh,
but it's just that.
What is it? Ironic humor or
ironic?
Kind of,
yeah.
Yeah, it's got a kind of ironic slant, I would imagine. But go on. All right, don't try and tell me an Odessa joke then. So it's not. It's the cultural or the soul of Odessa that will carry on, but not the SEZ.
We hope it will. And just before the war, I had a conversation with some people from Odessa who have read my materials about free cities and were thinking that we could create something here. And this is, I think, maybe my biggest dream, to apply all these ideas that we're developing here to one of my favorite cities.
Well, that's interesting.
After the war, after everything is peaceful again.
Well, what do you know about that? Like, say the war ended in a year. There's obviously going to be a massive rebuilding process. Do you know how to get involved in that? If there was to be the possibility of creating special zones in Ukraine, is that a reasonable thing to think? Is it actually quite realistic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. There are actually multiple these bottom-up initiatives. There is one called Від серця будова. It's not about Odessa. It's about creating this smart city near Kiev. The capital city, but I'm in I'm in constant conversation with the team that's developing it, and I got them in touch with the Free Cities team, and they took part in the conference last year. I don't know about this year. And again, I think that we here are doing very important thing by spreading these ideas, because in times of crisis, in times of rebuild, there is always a chance to excite someone with your ideas, to push it, to create something. So I know that there is a lot of talk there's a lot of talk among Ukrainian architects and planners because everyone understands that a lot of cities will need to be rebuilt, and you can't just rebuild them, one way or another, because a lot of people, millions of people have left the country. So if you want to get them back, you need, again, to go an extra mile. And that's why a lot of people are open to unconventional solutions. So my big concern is that Ukrainian planners, especially government planners, they don't just take copy-paste solutions. They think creatively. So don't just so there is well, that's again a very different a huge topic about the state of modern mainstream urbanism, but in a nutshell, it's all about copy-pasting without understanding how cities work. And I think that's very important that countries that are in the state of crisis and open to ideas that they understand this, that you can't, that cities are living organisms. You cannot they are not blank slate. You cannot just build whatever looks nice. You have to create incentives for people to create. You have to create a framework, and there is places like Odessa, as I said, they have a lot of creativity. So you just need to create the right incentive to unleash this creativity. You don't have to. It's not about bringing. I know that there was. So there were, for example, Norman Foster, one of the world's most famous architects. He was in conversations with Kharkiv, another Ukrainian city in eastern Ukraine, and about rebuilding the city. And there was a lot of backlash from the local urbanist community. Like, Sir Norman Foster has never been here. He doesn't know what it is. We have our own ideas. And in London, I was going to events organized by local architectural charities on how to basically help Ukraine rebuild itself after the war. And I remember there was a conversation about the old Soviet. This is one of the very, controversial topics: what to do with old Soviet buildings, because many of them are just boring, and there's nothing to preserve about them. But some of them are really exceptionally, some of them are iconic, yes, like the Держпром, the one that was hit 2 days ago in Kharkiv. I don't want to explain it, just Google it. It's fantastic. It's like from a Fritz Lang Metropolis movie. And there is a discussion, what do we do with it? Because on the one hand, it reminds you of a very, very dark period in history. On the other hand, they are iconic. And they were this London well-meaning young architects with glasses of wine and trendy glasses saying, oh, you cannot destroy old buildings because it's not, from sustainability point of view, it's very bad. You have to always preserve them. You can't destroy buildings. Like, you have to care about the planet. These are people who have never lived under communism, and they can't see the world from these perspectives, and they tell Ukrainians what to do. So it's very important that you don't do that.
Do you mean, I don't necessarily understand what you mean there. Are those people, the Londonites, the chattering Londoners, are they missing the point that those buildings remind people of an oppressive time?
Yes, but yes. That's just one example. That's an example. When I heard that, I understand that those are very well-meaning people, but they don't understand what they're talking about, and they shouldn't be in charge. It's very nice and great that there is, I hope, still such a so many people who want to help with expertise, with money to rebuild the country, but they shouldn't be the one making decisions, and because they don't know what's happening there. They don't know. And for example, there was it was London Barbican. There was another roundtable, or not like the panel discussion, and they were comparing Ukrainian war to like rebuilding Belfast or to Bosnia, but those were civil wars. Ukraine is not a civil war; it's a war between Russia and Ukraine. So it just reveals the a lack of understanding, which I think it's not malevolent. It's just, just a very narrow view of the world, very, Western centered.
Well, unfortunately, at least when I think of what's most likely to happen when the war's over, I don't necessarily have a rosy outlook on the way things will go. I'm sure governments will put out to tender projects which will be snapped up by large corporations, and you would imagine it would be quite a disappointing rebuilding process, would you say? I mean,
we know it's never easy navigating politics. If you want to build an amazing new city, if you want to build a free city, a city with a special economic zone status, it's super tricky. Well, you know it better than I. You've spoken to so many people doing it all over the world, and Honduras is the most telling case, the one that you know very well about. That you go, you push, you get pushed back, you make a stop, then the government changes, then there is another political shakeup, and you have to start, not all over again. You already have enough supporters, but you have to constantly, you have to keep investors' trust in the middle of all this political turmoil. So it's not going to be easy, and it's never guaranteed. But you have to use crisis anywhere in the world to try to advance very unconventional solutions. We don't know what's happening in Honduras now, but there've been multiple moments when it felt like it's over, but then turns out that creativity prevailed. And that it wasn't all that bad, and projects were going forward.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I have spoken to a lot of people trying to implement these things, and unfortunately, the number one problem is you're always on someone else's land, and that doesn't.
Unless you're a seasteader.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But unfortunately, when I'm talking about free cities projects, I want to get excited about the ones that I want to live in. And unfortunately, seasteading, although it's a phenomenal idea, and I'm fully on board with it now, I do understand.
On board?
Yeah, I know. They probably should. Yeah. Or what was it? Vote with your boat. That's it. Mm-hmm. I am fully on board because I do realise it's a viable thing that could actually happen, and it is actually happening. And you see it actually happening now. Even on cruise liners, you see it actually happening now. I just don't want to live like that. I'm a land person. I'm married to the land. I've got land, and I'd feel that land, is part of my soul, and I'd always want to be in a place like that. So I want those ones to work. And unfortunately, the political power, or just the power of politics and the power of states, is always a problem. And I've yet to find a way that you mitigate that, and I'm not sure there is a way. Historically, the way was to find a place that had no governance, the freedom, and that's still a pretty good strategy if you can find it, which is very difficult. Space and the sea, we know that now. These are the last frontiers.
Well, there's Liberland, but they have problems of their own.
It's a nightmare. I've been there as well. it's still a nightmare. Even though it's nobody's land, they're still getting hassled non-stop by people who are not claiming to own the land, but don't want them there as well, which is Croatia. They on one hand, they don't own the land, and they have to admit that publicly, because if they do, it means they don't own the land on the other side of the border that they really want. So they don't own the land, but they're still stopping things happening there, because it's just not the done thing these days to just take a bit of land and say, hello, here's my flag, this is my place now. You know, the whole world is kind of taken control of. And I've yet to find a place or a way or a method to mitigate that. The common one is law. But as we can see, like, Honduras is a classic example. It's shrouded, it's covered by legal agreements. Yet the government just said, well, those legal agreements are invalid because of XYZ. So in a way, they have no substance to them. And you know, we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, the story is not over.
Of course.
And as I said, there were multiple moments when it felt like, oh, it's falling apart. The government has prevailed, but then there was another glimpse of hope. So the story is far from being over, and I hope that that it's just the pre-elections, you know, that the current government is just trying to boost their popularity by doing this populist claims that, oh, we're cracking down on this, neo-colonialist or whatever they call it. So, but no, in principle, I totally agree. That's the biggest, catch-22 of free cities, that you're creating a refuge from the rules of a government, but ultimately you're at the whims of the same government that has made the situation so bad in the first place. So you need these enclaves in the most. So if you take, a rich Western country, there is a lot to. Like, you're from the UK, I'm sure you agree there is a lot to complain about in the UK, but ask an average person on the street, do you want to move to a no man's land and build a city from scratch? They say, are you crazy? Because in the end of the day, these are the problems you can cope with. But if you ask an average Honduran, do you want to move somewhere? You know how many Hondurans are moving to the US every year. They are risking their lives. They boarding these shaky boats, trying to escape. So when people are desperate, then for them that's a real opportunity that they consider, and that's why probably the most promising experiments of that kind you can find in the most desperate places. But they are desperate for these places are so bad for a reason. And the reason is usually the government, the bad governance. And then you're at the whims of the same government. So yeah, I totally agree. And you have to go between the Silla and Charybda. You have to navigate very, very, the labyrinth of law, international on top of the national. You have to have a lot of talks, formally, informally. You have to build coalition, and this is something that we libertarians really hate. All this politics,
Exactly.
And so you have to, have a lot of people on board doing all this different, the division of labor, all this different work. But the good thing is that you have more and more experiments. You have organizations like Tipolis, that are supporting multiple, and in the process, as you're supporting multiple projects like that, you gain experience. So we at the Free Cities Foundation, we kind of see ourselves as this hub of experience. We are keeping in touch with all these projects, and we're organizing this conference when they can share their ideas with each other, share the problems that they face, so that the next team that's building a free city in the other part of the world, they're already warned. They already know what to expect. You share expertise. You share, so initially it was all the usual suspects. Wherever you go, you see, I don't know, people from Pronomos, you see Patrick Friedman, you see Michael Strong, you see Tom Bell, the legal advisor behind many of these projects. Now you see a lot of new faces, and the movement is growing. And I think our best hope, if not the only hope, is to wait until to not put all the eggs in one basket, and wait for because the opportunity may get thinner in one place, but the window of opportunity may open somewhere else, and to learn from the past experience, to learn from past mistakes.
You've you made me think then. Never thought about it in those terms before, but you pointed out a really massive catch-22 situation that free cities find themselves in, and that is that some of the best places to create free cities are in desperate or dangerous places. Mm-hmm. But when you do, the argument levied against you will be neocolonialism. Yeah, you can't have one without the other. And this is exactly what I see. The knee-jerk reaction to the ZAs is
You've
exactly
been to Próspera.
That. Yes, exactly.
Right. So you saw that it's predominantly Hondurans living there.
Of course, yeah.
And people who say that they haven't been there. But unfortunately, they can make their voices, heard better than, because you are helping an average person, you're helping Hondurans who used to live in villages on Roatan, and they are not skilled in social media campaigns, unlike the left-wing activists who have launched this campaign against ZS and who's been running it for a decade, I guess, already. So that was, it's happening everywhere. Another story I like to talk about is Lavasa in India. That's a city in the state of Maharashtra, and it was built entirely privately by Lavasa Corporation, and everything about it is exceptional by India standards. So they didn't take the land by force. They spent 10 years, and they've made more than 1,000 independent transactions to assemble that land, because they wanted to make sure that everything is voluntary, that nobody takes them to court, and that, if you build a model city, a model for the future, it's a green, walkable, smart city. It is based on, it's inspired by Italian architecture. It is like nothing you see in big Indian cities. And most of its residents are people who used to live in nearby villages. So because they were offered, in exchange for their land, they were offered not just monetary compensation, they were offered jobs in this city, because the idea was to create a hub for tourism, like a refuge for. There is, for example, one of the key tenants is the senior people complex for retiring Indians who don't want to live in this chaotic Indian cities, but don't want to go abroad either. And all of that came into danger and became stalled for 10 years because there was a campaign led by what's called National Alliance of People's Movement. It's an umbrella left-wing organization for different movements. And one of their key positions was, fighting what they call neocolonialism. They call it special exploitation zones, the SEZs. And there were counter protests by the local villagers saying, like, they have 18 people and they're all external people. They're coming here to give interviews and leave. We live here. We are 1,000 people or 2,000 people. We have families whose livelihood depend on Lavasa's success. We all have jobs from them, and nobody's listening to us because we are not as eloquent. We cannot, go online. We cannot spread a media campaign. And they've been fighting for 10 years, and the finally the city was revived, and I don't know what's like how far it's gone, but it got a new owner, and hopefully it will be revived properly, not just legally. But that's a very sad story that you have people who are talking about neocolonialism and exploitation. They don't really care about the desires of the local people. They think that because they've read Marx and all this and Piketty, they are smarter and they know better what people want.
How do you deal with this, though? And I'm going to give you an example, because this is the problem I see as someone who probably would have thought this myself a number of years ago, because I basically hadn't thought it through. And that is, you have a place where everyone's poor, and you create an area and you put a boundary around it, and within that boundary, people are getting richer. And they can choose to go in there if they want, but around that boundary, the people, and in the rest of this place, the people will probably still be staying poor. And there you get this tension. And I'm not saying this is a bad way, because I think it's probably one of the only ways. Because if you have an area that's dangerous and you want to create a safe area, you need to put a boundary. You have to, right? When you do that, suddenly inside the boundary, everyone's safe, and outside, the left-wing and government can say, look, all these people are now at a loss, aren't they?
Well, they're poor not because there is a rich enclave next to it. They are poor because, probably they live in a failed state. Which
but it's a very visual example.
Yeah, I agree.
Of that. And I think, how do you stop this becoming the thing that everyone just points at? Because that's the natural thing to do.
You create an alternative. You create places like Lavasa. And in Dubai, a lot of people live in gated communities, but places like our neighborhood is not a gated community. So that's where, service workers can hang out after work, mingle together with the expats. So I think that there is a demand. So a lot of people who can afford live in gated communities, they choose not to do that because it just doesn't feel right, because it creates this, artificiality. So, but you have a lot of this gated. In India, I think there are how many? 45 million people. I don't remember. There was like a lot of people live in gated communities because, just the surrounding cities are they have disastrous condition, but it's not the gated communities or their residents or their developers to blame for. I think the solution is to build alternative ways, to build more inclusive communities that would still, provide safety, provide nice walkable streets, appealing architecture, and the solution is to talk more about places like Lavasa. There is a place called Cayala in Guatemala City, which is also a newly built city within a city, and by Leon Creer, a famous architect who's a friend of our king, King Charles, who built Poundbury. I don't know if you know about this story. It's King's Pet project in, where is it? Dorchester.
Oh, is that the traditional looking village?
Yes. So Cayala is another place like that. It's not gated. It may have this, feeling of exclusivity, but it is not gated. So I think that and again, if we go back to my original argument, people who want to fence themselves off all the bad things in the city, in the country, they already have plenty of opportunities to do that. So, and we need to, build cities that would be, a win-win situation for everyone. Profit opportunity for developer, better livelihood for people of different income brackets, and a field for experimentation for us as a humanity, more of choice between different governance model, different urban planning models.
I'm just thinking always, because this is our big example that we've got at the moment about Próspera, because, this is the steepest learning curve I think the Free Cities movement's ever been on, and it's happening right now. And it appears that some of these pitfalls are unavoidable. I'll go back to the one I mentioned earlier, which is if you create a disparity between living standards in a similar geographical area, someone in a government is going to point that out and use it as leverage to basically get voters, aren't they? And when is that going to never happen? It's always going to happen, because on one side of the spectrum politically, you have people who think that individuals should be able to succeed. And on the other side of the political spectrum, you have people who think that all individuals should roughly have the same and succeed, right? So if the prevailing party is on that side of the spectrum, they're always going to look at that disparity of wealth and say, look, that's bad. They've got more than you. Obviously, they're completely overlooking the fact that prior to the better standard of living arising, everyone had a shit standard of living. So all you've done is rise the standard of living of some people, but not others. But left-wing governments love it.
It reminds me that joke that I think it's an Odessa joke. You asked me.
Oh, brilliant! Come on, tell me. Make me laugh.
Like two people two dissidents in the Soviet Union talk to each other, and one say, "Well, my grandfather was fighting in the revolution so that there will be no rich people. I thought he was fighting that there will be no poor people."
So I get it now. It's self-deprecating, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a people who've had to come to terms with kind of like the absurdity of life. That's where their comedy comes from. It's like, we find ourselves in this strange situation, let's laugh about it. Mm-hmm. Is that it?
Yes, but back to the Honduras. Yeah, I remember I had this conversation with Michael Strong, who is one, Michael Strong, yes, about Próspera, and how do you kind of close this gap between, how do you avoid the situation we just discussed. And he said, well, at least in theory, that you need to create economic prosperity. You need to do it as fast as you can, because then you can tip the balance and you can have enough people who see, okay, I think we're being lied to here. I think these are not actually the villains. I think that, you will have not just tens of people who are stakeholders in success of Próspera or other similar project. You have tens of thousands. And this is very tricky. And this requires very unconventional solutions. But at least in theory, it sounds to me like a reasonable thing that you need to create, because there is this NIMBYs, not in my backyard, people who oppose any development anywhere, anyhow. But there is a movement, the emerging movement called YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. So people who are talking about the benefits of cities growing, developing, changing. And in the case of new cities, you have NIMBYs who have no stakes in its success, who have nothing to lose if it falls apart. And you don't have YIMBYs yet, because people who will benefit from it, they don't know about it yet. They will find out. Even if they don't move there, they will probably feel the spillover effects because of the overall economy growing, but they don't know about it. So you have to... One thing actually is the non-territorial governance. The Próspera has this e-governance element where people can benefit for themselves and contribute to Próspera without moving there, by registering their companies, hiring local people. So this is one of the conversations I will be moderating at the conferences about metaverse. So I don't know if we have time to talk about it, but this is one of the things. You gather a community online, you kickstart a business environment online, you get enough people who are ready to relocate somewhere, and then you come to the host country, not just with a vague business plan, but you say, here we have 10,000 people who want to buy a house here, move in, and start generating wealth and contributing to the economy. This is all very tentative because we're just entering this era, I think, but this is something to explore for the free cities enthusiasts too.
I spoke about this with Olivier Roland. Mm-hmm. Did you listen to that episode? He lives in Dubai, and he's a kind of influencer. And he said, look, I've got enough followers to approach governments. And it's something they'd thought about. So you have enough. I mean, he's a kind of influencer in the digital nomad space. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've got 5,000 digital nomads all on your books and ready to agree with you, and you approach a government and say, give us a good visa for 12 months. I've got 5,000 people willing to come. That's quite a big, that's a good, incentive.
Yeah, that's one. That's another option. You should. You don't have to persuade thousands of people. You have to. If you can persuade one person with thousands of followers.
Yeah, exactly. But before we go on to the metaverse stuff, because I want to go back to that predicament we were talking about, and I want to go back to something that the guy I was talking to. It's episode 101, by the way. It's a guy called Ben Ark, and he's a developer, but he's a traditional lefty, and he went there. He's actually been on a panel with Peter, where he was on the opposing side of the panel. Peter was advocating for free cities, for free private cities in this particular instance, and he was kind of putting the counter argument. Anyway, he went there, and like I say, he was pleasantly surprised. And so I was drilling him to try and get out of him, come on, what are the downsides? Because I want to know, because I want to help fix the downsides to all this stuff. And like I say, he came up with that point that visually it doesn't look good, which we know the answer to. But what he also said, and this is really important, is that when you create a place like a free city, if you reach out into the local community and benefit them, they will be on board with your project. And there's plenty of ways to do this. And I think one of the best ways, and this would work in Próspera now, would be for Próspera to have someone build a hospital inside Próspera, for example, that everyone can use.
That's what Lavasa did. They not just created a hospital, they offered free education to kids of people working for. They brought fresh running water to a place where people have always been using wells. They have immensely raised the people's living standards. That's the reason why these several thousands people have been campaigning for 10 years to get the project revived, because not just because they had jobs, they had all these perks that they couldn't hope for otherwise.
But even, and he mentioned that apparently on Roatan, people hate the energy provider. It's really expensive and cumbersome and not very good. And if you had a kind of form of energy production on your place, I mean, he was talking about things that you don't have to move to Próspera to benefit from. If there's a hospital in Próspera, you can come into Próspera as an outsider and use that hospital. Mm-hmm. And so you can be a local who's benefiting from what's going on inside Próspera. Same with if you have enough land to generate, put a load of solar panels and generate your own energy source. Then that energy can then reach out to the community as well. And this is how these places grow, I think, because otherwise they grow within their own boundaries and you have to move there. Like in the example of, right, if you come here, we'll educate you. Great. But what if I don't want to move there? What if I live next door and now I see everyone getting educated over there, but I'm not getting educated here? That's where that tension arises. And then all of a sudden, some politicians are going to come in and go, aha, here's an opportunity. There's tension. These two people don't like each other. Right. Let's use that to get votes, which is what they do, obviously. But I think that is the way. I think the outreach into the community, because they won't care. There's no political side to that. If you're helping people, then there's no political side to help. If you're providing hospital services, it doesn't matter if you're a lefty or a righty or a centrist or whatever. You're getting your ailments fixed. It's not political. It doesn't have to be political. You know?
And governments very often, they hate it because they don't like that people get this idea that you don't need like these things can be provided by private actors and they will be accessible not just to the wealthy. So that's another thing, that the hypocrisy that if you create a gated community where all amenities are club goods and only available to the members, then the government say, oh, this is unfair, this is segregation. But if you create an open access community which benefits not just the members but the surrounding, then governments say, oh, they want to replace the government. Like, this is very bad. That's what happening in where is it? I don't remember. Somewhere, yeah, there's a lot of these talks about Facebook building its city in California around its headquarters, and they are promising to provide some of these amenities, and and local politicians hate it because they say, oh, you don't have to, private people replacing governments is evil. It's very dangerous. So when you provide goods just for your own people, it's evil. But when you try to step on the realm that's always been considered part. Well, not always, actually. That's another story, because it's for centuries charity was provided by private capital, and schools. It's not just in Odessa; it's everywhere. Like, the first pension funds were private. Schools and hospitals, a lot of them in America, in the UK and other countries, were provided privately and free of charge for many people who were struggling. And then we conveniently forgot about it. It's called, in economics, it's called crowding out, when the government comes into some industry, and healthcare, like NHS in the UK. Don't get me started. And monopolizes healthcare, and then of course you don't have enough private healthcare providers to help everyone, and those that are available will be very expensive. And then you say, oh, you see, we can't have healthcare without our holy NHS.
Well, what you're alluding to, and something that is so obvious to me as every day goes on, is how kind of like miserly the governments are, in as much as they hate competition. That's all it is. Like, and it's such a like a miserly attitude. It's like, okay, something over there is doing better than me, so instead of trying to compete harder against that thing, I'm just going to use my power to say you can't do that. And you see it in so many contexts around the world. The worst one these days is now a lot of governments talking about bringing in an exit tax from their country, as in, other countries are better than us and people want to move there. So let's just stop people leaving, and that's a terrible sign. I mean, we saw this, in East Berlin, when a country's stopping you getting out, something's wrong, something's bad, and it's just this, I don't know whether it was always like this. I think maybe it's a symptom of this kind of overgrown governments who just are so pompous and so like, there's no other way of doing it except this, that they can't handle any kind of competition in any shape or form. And that's also what I love about the Free Cities movement. It's purely competition. All it is governance competition. And it's such a beautiful thing, because it's very hard. I can't think of many ways to argue against it. Like, if you say, right, we should have competition in governance, I don't think there's anyone out there who will go, no, we shouldn't. Apart from, guess who? The people in power. But your average person is going to go, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. People competing for me, that sounds like a very good idea. you know.
You feel very important.
Whatever. I just feel it just feels right. I need to feel
because
important.
we're used to private providers competing for us. We come to a shop and we expect a good service. If we don't get it, we go to another shop. But if we don't get a good service from your government, it's very, very difficult, even without the exit tax, to move to another place. It's it's what's in economics called transaction costs. Before getting access to a better service, you have to pay such a huge transaction cost that you will think twice and thrice.
But you think positively about the future, do you? Do you think we are on the horizon? Maybe there's a golden age of competing amongst governments, smaller governments. I mean, do you see any of this coming?
I think we're doing a good job making this more likely outcome. I think that, the conference that we're having in a few days, this is where I think my optimism reaches a peak every year. Yeah. Because you hear stories from such corners of the world where you would never expect it, or you expect it, you just haven't heard about it. It's a conference where you can, an architect from Britain can meet an investor from California, and a planner or a politician from Panama and get together. Oh, let's do something together. This sounds really cool. So yeah, my optimism comes from meeting people like those that we will hear from in a few days. My optimism comes from seeing how many people are getting disillusioned in the traditional models, and I think COVID has accelerated this process. So many people started moving here and there from one place to another when they suddenly realize how pervasive governments can be and how much they can, intervene in your private space and tell you what to do with your private life during all the lockdowns, and you can't do anything about it. So, we, the libertarians, have been talking about it for a long time, but for most people it was, something abstract. When you say government, in theory, they have a possibility to intervene in your daily life. But when they see that governments actually can tell you to stay indoors and, not see your relatives, okay, that's kind of nasty. And people don't just, not even, so a lot of people started moving here and there, but those who couldn't afford it, or who are not still, pissed off enough, they still, a lot of them are slowly changing their mind about, what to expect from their current government. So I think that I remember that in between 2020 and 2022, I think that the movement has grown exponentially, and the 2022 conference here in Prague, there was so many new faces that we haven't seen before. It was all those people who started asking questions. Can we have, is it the best we can have? Can we have something different? And they, people have, with all their remote work, they also have more time to listen to podcasts like yours, watch videos, read books like Titus's book, and discover these ideas. So I think it's a matter of emergence. You get enough people working on it, enough people passively supporting it, and then things start getting built in brick and mortar.
They do. And on that note, I think that's a pretty good place to end. You're absolutely right. The conference is in a couple of days. By the time this goes out, though, it will have been long gone, I'm sure. But thanks for coming in again, Vera. It's good to see you again. And I look forward to catching up with your talk. It'll have to be online, obviously, because I'm recording back-to-back interviews while I'm here. I have to, because all the movers and shakers are here in Prague now, and it's so exciting. But thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Tim.
I enjoy your words of wisdom, as always. and I'll see you next time.
See you. Thank you very much.